All right, people, welcome. Welcome. Let's start by giving a little charity. It's always good to give charity. Those who are watching on YouTube or at home, grab a coin, grab your charity box if you have one, and put a coin in. Or if you, a dollar bill, or if you have a banking app, usually you can send money to charities through that. Okay. Couple of announcements. If you would like to sponsor tonight's class or a future class in honor of whatever it might be, please reach out, rabbi@jewisherie.com. By the way, I spell it out because people don't know how to spell Erie, surprisingly. If you'd like to take part in this incredible opportunity. Rosh Hashanah is coming up. Rosh Hashanah is coming up next week. Starts Friday night and ends on Sunday night. So we are having services and a wonderful holiday lunch on Sunday, September 17th, if I'm not mistaken. The flyer is on Facebook. You could take a look. Chabad of Erie Facebook. Also, next week we're having a very exciting new class. It's going to be this class next week is not going to happen. It's going to be postponed, but we're going to have a class instead on Thursday, 11 a.m. here. To introduce and to help us appreciate better what is Rosh Hashanah, what are the different practices, why we do these things, and to learn the significance and importance of what a Jew does on Rosh Hashanah. 11 a.m. Flyer is also on the front door if anybody's interested. Okay. I think that was it. Okay. If you have any questions, you would like the curriculum for the class, please send me an email and we'll make that happen. Okay, so tonight is a very focused topic. It's not a very broad, very general, very overarching theme, but it's a particular topic, and it's going to be very interesting, I think. It's about a Torah scroll, a Sefer Torah in Hebrew. So let's get into this. The history of writing the Torah. When did Moses begin writing the Torah? When did he write the stories of Genesis? And how did he manage to write 13 Torah scrolls himself? So in this week's Torah reading, we read the commandment for every Jew to write a Torah scroll. What did the Jews do upon hearing the commandment? Did they devote all their waking hours to quickly writing a Torah scroll? Why do we not write our own scrolls today? We're going to go on a journey through time to learn how Moses wrote his scrolls, how the Jews wrote theirs, and how we fulfill this mitzvah today as well. Tonight's class is based on two talks actually from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, both from the winter time of 1981, possibly 82. Okay, let's start in section A. In your booklet, it's page 3. When did they have time? Now, that question is meaningless without the context, so let's get into the context. In this week's Torah portion, we learn about a special commandment which God commands the Jewish people, which is to write for themselves a Torah scroll, 5 books of Moses. So let's see it inside. Source 1, Deuteronomy 31. God said to Moses, "Behold, your days are approaching for you to die. Call Joshua and stand in the tent of meeting, and I will inspire him." So Moses and Joshua went and stood in the tent of meeting. The Lord appeared in the tent in a pillar of cloud. The pillar of cloud stood at the entrance of the tent, and the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, you are about to lie with your forefathers, and this nation will rise up and stray after the deities of the nations of the land into which they are coming. They will forsake me and violate my covenant which I made with them. My fury will rage against them on that day, and I will abandon them and hide my face from them, and they will be consumed. Many evils and troubles will befall them. They will say on that day, 'Is it not because our God is no longer in my midst that these evils have befallen me?'" Here's the main part. "Now, write down this song for yourselves and teach it to the children of Israel. Place it into their mouths in order that this song will be for me as a witness for the children of Israel." One of the commentators on the Torah, he's known as the Ralbag. The Ralbag explains to us that when God commands that this particular song should be written, it's referring to the whole Torah. What is this talking about? So the current Torah portion that we're in, it's actually 2 Torah portions, Nitzavim and Vayeilech, is the third to last Torah portion in the entire 5 books of Moses, Torah. There's 2 more. The next one is next week's is Ha'azinu, and the last one is Vizot HaBracha. Ha'azinu, next week's portion, is essentially a song. It's a song. It's very poetic, and without the commentary's help, we would have no idea what it's saying, honestly. But it sounds very nice. So when God commands that we write down this song, it seems to be talking about the next Torah portion, the portion of Ha'azinu. It's a song. But the Ralbag explains to us, as we'll see momentarily, that it's actually referring to the entire Torah, which also contains this song. I think we're still on page 3 for you. Yeah, you're still on page 3. So let's see the Ralbag's commentary. Source 2. Now write down this song for yourselves and teach it to the children of Israel. Place it in their mouths. He says, it is later explained that this song is the entire Torah. As the verse states, and Moses wrote this song, and, quote, it was when Moses finished writing the words of this Torah in a scroll until their very completion. This attests that this song means the entire Torah, including this specific song. So we have a verse that says Moses wrote this song, and we have a verse that says Moses completed writing the entire Torah until its end. Which one did he write? So it's referring to the same thing. He wrote the entire Torah, which contains this song. Okay. What we're getting from this is that there is a mitzvah, just like there's a mitzvah to pray, there's a mitzvah to eat kosher, there's a mitzvah to write a Torah. Okay. So let's see what the Rebbe has to say about this. Every Jew had to write a Torah scroll, page 4. Moses' command to the Jewish people, now write down this song for yourselves, was given during their 40th year in the desert, shortly before Moses' passing on the 7th of Adar. If you don't know Jewish dates, we'll figure it out, don't worry. We can deduce this dating from the fact that Moses began to relay the book of Deuteronomy on the first of the 11th month, which is the month of Shavat. So the conclusion of the book, including now write down the song, must have been said shortly before the 7th of Adar. Before we go further, I just want to mention there are rugelach and there's orange juice in the back if anybody would like. There's also coffee and tea in the next room. Please help yourselves. So let's get the Jewish month in order over here. We have the month of Adar. Adar is the month of Purim. Okay, Purim is the 14th of Adar. The preceding month, the month before Adar, is the month of Shavat. Okay. Moses passes on the 7th of Adar, the 7th day of the month of Adar. And the book of Deuteronomy starts, we're in the book of Deuteronomy, the last book. The book of Deuteronomy starts by saying that this took place, what Moses is about to say at the beginning of the book, in the first day of the 11th month. The 11th month, if you count that out from the month of Nisan, which is technically the first month, you will arrive at the month of Shavat. Okay? Just an interesting little tidbit. That tells us that the entire book of Deuteronomy, okay, Shavat, the first of Shavat till the 7th of Adar, when Moses passes, is 30 days plus 7 is roughly 37 days. The entire book is 37 days. Fascinating, huh? The whole book of Genesis is like 1,600 years, and Deuteronomy is like a little over a month. So this tells us that this command to write down, to write a Torah scroll, to write down a Torah, took place shortly before Moses' passing. Going further, seemingly when the Jewish people heard this command from Moses, they were all immediately obligated to write a personal Torah scroll, all 600,000 adults. However, we don't find any trace of this extraordinary event. Moses gives them a commandment. Write a Torah scroll. Write a Torah. They were immediately obligated to write it down. As we'll see soon, actually, they couldn't wait. They couldn't delay it. They had to do it right there and then. But 600,000 people, each writing a scroll, okay, it can happen. But we'll see soon that the question is actually stronger, that it had to happen in a certain short amount of time. But we don't find any record of this. Not in the Torah, not from the words of our sages in the Okay, that was very strange. Sandy, you with us? I think you are. Your mic is off. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, I don't know what that's going to look like, but apparently the Zoom just went off and decided to continue recording. Okay. Anyway, going further.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you, but now you're back on.
Good. Okay, so he buried in the valley in the land of Moab, opposite Beth Peor. And no person knows the place of his burial until this day. I will say an interesting point. There's a very fascinating story in the Talmud. I think it was the Roman emperor at the time. He wanted to find Moses' grave. And the Torah testifies that nobody knows where it is until this day. The funny thing is, we do know where it is, technically. It's on a certain mountain, Har Nevo, it says in the Torah, a mountain called Mount Nevo. Currently, we know roughly the location, more or less-ish. But back in the day, I think they knew exactly which mountain it was. And the way the Talmud describes it is that he sent a bunch of soldiers to this mountain to seek out Moses' grave. And they saw there was some sort of cave in the side of the mountain, and they figured that's where it must be. So they sent these soldiers up the side of the mountain, and they're climbing, and they're climbing, and they're climbing. And as they looked up, they see the cave up there. So they're climbing closer and closer to the cave, and they look up, and the cave is the same distance it was when they were, 10 feet back. And they climb further and further and further, and every time they look up, they see the cave is still the same distance away. This is not a normal situation. And so they were a little smart. They decided to go on the other side of the mountain. They climbed to the top, and they came from the top. And the same thing happened. As they got closer, we went further down. So they couldn't actually get to the cave. Okay, going further. The children of Israel wept for Moses in the plains of Moab for 30 days, and then the days of weeping and mourning for Moses came to an end. Joshua, the son of Nun, was full of the spirit of wisdom because Moses had laid his hands upon him. The children of Israel obeyed him, and they did as the Lord had commanded Moses. Joshua is Moses' faithful assistant, student, apprentice, who succeeded Moses as the leader of the Jewish people. Hence the next book of the Torah is called Joshua, as we'll see in a second. Source 4, Joshua 1:1. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, the son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, has died. Arise now and cross the Jordan River, you and this entire nation, to the land that I am giving to the children of Israel. The people came up out of the Jordan River on the 10th day of the first month and camped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. I want to throw in here, it's not relevant right now, but it will be. There is an underlying, I don't know what to call it, energy or soul to tonight's class. It's going to be a little bit of a technical class, but there's an underlying thing going on here, and we'll address it at the end of the class. There's a heartbeat to this discussion. Okay. Page 5. Actually, we're already on page 5. Mission Impossible, says the Rebbe. Moreover, shortly after this commandment was given, Moses passed away on the 7th of Adar, and the Jewish people mourned him for 30 days. After the mourning period was over, the Jewish people began their preparations for crossing the Jordan River on the 10th of the first month, Nisan, and following that, they were occupied with conquering the land of Israel. It seems impossible that in the short time between the 7th of Adar and the 10th of Nisan, Nisan is the following month after Adar. Nisan is the month of Passover. Okay, 7th of Adar to the 10th of Nisan is 1 month and 3 days. Not very long. Somehow every Jew was able to fulfill this mitzvah to write a personal Torah scroll. There are also specific prerequisites for writing a Torah scroll: a trained scribe, parchment, ink, etc. It seemed completely impossible for such an enormous job to be carried out in such a short period of time. Let's talk about what goes into writing a Torah scroll. I'm not a scribe, but I know more or less the process. A good expert scribe. An expert scribe means somebody who's learned the laws of writing a Torah scroll, a Sefer Torah. They know what they're doing, and they're very meticulous with it. It's a very meticulous project. A very expert scribe going on full speed can usually write a Torah. It takes them around an entire year. Okay? It's a long piece of, not piece of parchment, but it's a long string of pieces of parchment, all attached together, rolled into a roll. I'm sure everyone's seen these, Sefer Torah, and it has 2 wooden poles holding it together. It's Torah. Such a person needs to have advanced training. They need to know what they're doing. Not willy-nilly. Anybody could just pick up a quill. It has to be a quill, by the way, a feather, not a pen. It must be handwritten, has to be on parchment. You have to process the parchment. You can't just pick up some paper. The ink must be a certain kind of ink. And there are many, many halachic, many rules in Jewish law for writing a Torah. And if any of these things are off, the Torah is not kosher. Now, I gave this class actually on Wednesday in the Cambridge Springs prison, and someone there asked, "1 second, I thought, why is that Torah kosher or not kosher? You can't eat it." I said, "Fantastic question." So I explained that kosher is specifically refers to food. If it's kosher, it's not kosher. But the word kosher on its own technically means it's appropriate. It's fitting. It's fitting for a Jew to eat, or it's not fitting for a Jew to eat. So it could also be used in a broader sense that the thing that we're talking about is either acceptable or it's not acceptable. If a single letter in the Torah has 304,600 something letters. If one single letter, even if it's a little letter yud, tiniest letter, if it's missing, the entire Torah is not kosher. It's invalid, can't be used. If one letter is extra, there's an extra letter, it also can't be used. If there's a letter that's cracked in a certain way, or there's a letter that has a hole in it in certain circumstances, it's also invalid. There's so many things that can invalidate a Torah. When writing God's name, it has to be written with a certain measure of focus and concentration more than the other letters and words. It's an enormous undertaking. Somehow, all the Jews wrote this thing for each of them, each on their own, within a month. It seems very, very unlikely and very impossible, actually. So we have to understand, how did they do this? How did all these people, 600,000 people, each write their own Torah in roughly a month? It just doesn't seem possible. So to understand this and to understand the answer, we have to back up. We have to look and understand, how was the Torah transmitted from God to the Jewish people? Meaning, we have the 5 books of Moses, from Genesis till Deuteronomy. What happened? When did we receive this text that was written, that we had to write down? Let's see. Section B, a work in progress. We're on page 6. Source 5 is from Exodus. This is shortly before the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. Moses came and told the people all the words of the Lord and all the ordinances. For those of us like myself who don't know fancy English, ordinances means rules, mitzvahs in this case. The people all answered in unison, "All the words that the Lord has spoken we will do." Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and he arose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain and 12 monuments for the 12 tribes of Israel. Rashi is the main commentator on the Torah. Let's see what he says on these words. Moses came and told the people, on that very day, says Rashi, all the words of the Lord, the mitzvot of separation and keeping a distance from the mountain, not for now. All the ordinances means the 7 mitzvot commanded to all of humanity, and the mitzvot of Shabbat, honoring parents, the red heifer, and the laws commanded at Marah. Moses wrote, here's the main words actually, from Genesis until the giving of the Torah. And he wrote the mitzvot commanded at Marah. He arose early in the morning on the 5th of Sivan. Sivan is the month, 2 months after Nisan, the month of Passover. It's when we receive the Torah on the 6th or the 7th of Sivan. So even before we received the Torah officially in Mount Sinai, Moses had already written part of it. That's what we just learned. He wrote from the beginning of Genesis, the story of Adam and Eve and creation, all the way till that, well, not current, but it was then current, point in history. He wrote the creation story of the patriarchs, the exile in Egypt, exodus from Egypt, and the mitzvot, the rules, the commandments commanded in Marah. During the coming years, during their journey through the desert for the next 40 years, after certain events or commandments, additional chapters and parts were added to the Torah. Okay, let's see how that worked. But first and foremost, the written Torah, not by heart. Source 6. God said to Moses, inscribe these words for yourself, for according to these words I have formed a covenant with you and with Israel. Source 7, we're going to look in the Talmud, the book of Gittin, page 60, side B. We'll explain this in a second. Rabbi Yehuda bar Nachmani, the interpreter of Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, said, it is written, inscribe these words for yourself. And it is also written according to these words. How does this work? Written words may not be studied orally, and oral words may not be transcribed. What are we talking about? So, when we receive the Torah on Mount Sinai, I've explained this many times, but it's an important topic, so it's always good to hear it again. When we received the Torah on Mount Sinai, we did not receive a book. We received a book and something else, meaning we received a text. We received words that we had to write down. We also received an oral tradition, an interpretation, the meaning of these words. If we just received the text, anybody could translate and interpret the words however they so please. It says in the beginning of the Torah, Bereshit bara Elokim, in the beginning God created. Maybe it means it's good to eat ice cream. On a different level, it means it's good to eat ice cream. Who says it doesn't mean that? We have an interpretation. We have an oral tradition that tells us how to interpret and how to understand the Torah on varying levels. So every time we have a text in the Torah, we received another mitzvah. We received also the explanation for the mitzvah, how to do the mitzvah, what we're supposed to do. So we have the written text and we have the oral text, so to speak, the oral tradition, the oral interpretation. The Gemara, the Talmud, asks a very interesting question. One verse says to write down these words as a text, in a book, in a scroll. Another verse says, according to these words. Now, if you look in the Hebrew, this is one of those things where it's better to look at it in the Hebrew. The Hebrew says, al pi hadvarim ha'ela, which basically means according to these words. But the words al pi, who knows what peh means in Hebrew? Who speaks Hebrew? Peh. Sandy, I think you know. Peh.
I do not know.
I'll tell you what it means. You'll know that. You'll remember. Go, oh, right. A mouth.
Okay.
Yeah. Peh. So P is another way of saying mouth, not in modern Hebrew, but it's in biblical Hebrew. Al pi hadvarim ha'ela means by the mouth of these things, these words. So is it oral or is it written? So from here, the Talmud learns that the written text may not be taught orally, and the oral tradition, the oral interpretation may not be written down. They're two distinct things. What does that mean? You can't teach the written text orally? Meaning, if you found a person, or if you have a person that learns the entire 5 books of Moses, start to finish, and they know it verbatim, word for word, from memory. They don't need the book anymore. They could ask them, what does it say here and there? I'll tell you right away. Like they know what it says from the beginning to the end, word for word. If such a person teaches, this text without looking in the text, they can teach the basic ideas, but there's tremendous amounts of information which will be lost because there's no written text. This doesn't work in English, but I'll use English as to contrast. In English, we have consonants and vowels, correct? Right? We have, B, C, D, F, G, H. Those are the consonants, the letters that have a certain, let's call it a sound. And we have the vowels, which give us shape to those sounds. A, E, I, O, and U, right? And sometimes Y. Is that how it goes? So the vowels help us sound out the consonants. So in Hebrew, it doesn't work like this. What do you mean? That in Hebrew, every single letter is a consonant. Every single one. There are no vowel letters. There are vowels, but they're not letters. They're little markings that go under, on the side of, or on top of the letters that gives us the let's call it the shape of the sound. So if you have, let's say, the letter Aleph, the letter Aleph doesn't have any particular shape. It's just an sound. In fact, if there's no vowel, you can't really make the sound. You have to give it a particular form. So if you put the vowel patach underneath the Aleph, it now has an ah sound. If you put a shuruk by the Aleph, it now has an oo sound. Okay? In the Torah scroll, in a Sefer Torah, there are no vowels written. It's just letters. Okay? It's just letters. If you were able to back up a second, being that that's the case, how do I say this? So all that information is lost. The vowels are not, you can't see the vowels, but you can't even learn about them because it's all being written, it's all being taught orally. But in addition to this, there are words in Hebrew that let's contrast them with English again. If you take a word in English, pick a word. Table, yeah? Table, it's a good word. If you write table without the letter A, what does it spell? Nothing. It says tabula. It's not a word, right? In Hebrew, if you skip certain letters, sometimes you can actually get away with it. The word still stays the same. You can add letters sometimes, and the word still the same word. And not only that, but it sounds exactly the same. In a Torah, every letter is precise. It's a godly book. Every letter is a godly letter. And there's information and there's secrets behind every letter. And if there's a letter that you didn't get across because you're saying it verbally and orally, you don't see it in front of you, you missed that piece of information. So to the other way around, having the oral tradition cannot be written down. It has to be oral. Okay. This idea that the written text cannot be discussed and cannot be taught orally is going to be very relevant in a second. Page 7. Still page 7. The personal Torahs were written in real time. When the Jewish people received the Torah, the verse states, and Moses wrote all of God's words, and he took the scroll of the covenant. Rashi explains that at this time, Moses wrote down the entire Torah from Genesis until the point of the giving of the Torah, as we just learned. At that point, it might say at that point in your thing, it's a mistake. At that point, the distinction between the written Torah and the oral Torah was created. The written Torah had to be committed to writing, while the oral Torah could not be. This is the meaning of the verse, write these words, as Rashi explains. However, you are not allowed to write down the oral Torah, as we just learned. Okay. We can deduce from this that post-Sinai, the Jewish people were obligated to commit all new sections of the Torah to writing, because it is forbidden to study parts of the Torah from memory alone. What are we saying here? Well, we'll describe it in detail in a second. Before the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai, Moses wrote down everything from the beginning of Genesis till that point, to the middle of Exodus somewhere. As they continued their journey through the desert, after certain things happened, after certain commandments were given from God to Moses, to the Jewish people, these sections were written down. Why were they written down? Maybe they just couldn't be passed down orally, because written Torah cannot be discussed, cannot be taught orally. It has to be written down. So you can't even talk about it until it's written down. So immediately when these mitzvahs were given, they had to write it down immediately. In other words, sections kept being added over the next 40 years. That's what we're getting at. Okay. Source 8. Let's see this in Maimonides' preface to his commentary on the Mishnah. Know that every mitzvah commanded to Moses by God was given with its explanation. God told Moses the mitzvah and then explained all the ideas and concepts included in it. And the order of teaching it to the Jewish people is explained in the Talmud. A fascinating little thing over here. Moses would enter his tent, followed by Aaron, his brother, the high priest. And Moses would tell him the mitzvah once, followed by its meaning. Aaron then went to Moses' right side, and his children, meaning Aaron's children, Elazar and Itamar, entered, and Moses told them what he had told Aaron. One sat on Moses' left side, the other on Aaron's right. Then the 70 elders entered, and Moses taught them what he had taught Aaron and his children. Then came all the Jews and those who desired to hear God's word, and Moses taught them until everyone had heard it from Moses' mouth. So Aaron heard it 4 times. His sons heard it 3 times. The elders heard it 2 times, and the Jewish people heard it 1 time. The truth is, they actually all heard it 4 times, because then Aaron, it doesn't describe it here, but Aaron left, and then he said it again, and then his sons left, and he said it again, and so everybody heard it 4 times. Then the people went home and taught it to their fellows, and they wrote it on scrolls which they read regularly. Then they studied the God-given meaning and explanation of that mitzvah. They wrote down the mitzvah and studied the explanation orally. What we're saying here is that Moses was the only one who wrote down the words of the Torah as they were going along, and he was adding sections as we traveled and as we received commandments from God. Moses, every time he received more information, he taught it to the entire people. And they went home afterwards and they wrote it down in their own personal scrolls. This is going to help us answer our original question. Page 9. The scrolls were already almost complete. As a result, when the Jewish people heard the commandment from Moses to, quote, now write down this song for yourselves, they already had all the previously delivered sections of the Torah in writing. All they had to do at that point was to complete the Torah from the verse, now write down this song, until the end of the Torah. This explains how it was possible for all the Jews to write a Torah scroll over such a short period of time. They already had most of the Torah written. All they had to do now was complete it. They were writing this Torah for 40 years. 40 years. Every time a new section was taught, they wrote it down immediately. So when Moses gives them, and God gives them through Moses the mitzvah to write a Torah for themselves, they didn't have to write a whole Torah from scratch. That would take a year or longer for each person. All they had to do was the scrolls that they already had, and they were already putting together for the past 40 years, all they needed to do was finish them. That's not so long. It doesn't take so long. Maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks. That's very feasible. Now we understand how they wrote it all so quickly, because they didn't write the whole thing quickly. They wrote just the end of it. Okay. Before we go further, any questions? By the way, I forgot to mention there's Post-it notes over there and there's pens if you had to write down questions in middle class. You don't want to forget it. We're all good so far. Okay. Section C, page 10, 13 Torah scrolls. We just finished with one Torah scroll. Now we're going to get to 13. Let's see what's going on. Who did Moses give the scrolls to? As we're about to learn in a moment, we learned that Moses had written a Torah scroll already from before the giving of the Torah on Mount Sinai. The truth is, he had actually 13 Torah scrolls, which he gave to each of the 13 tribes. Now, there are 12 tribes. How to get 13 tribes? There's actually technically 13, because we had of our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Familiar with these people, right? Abraham is the first Jew. He had 2 sons. One of them was Isaac. Isaac had 2 sons. One of them was Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons. Each of these sons became their own tribe, their own family among the Jewish people. We're talking tens and hundreds of thousands of people each. The tribe of Joseph actually split into 2. There's 2 separate tribes, his 2 sons, Manasseh and Ephraim. Don't ask me how to say that in English. I haven't the faintest clue. So there are 13 tribes, including the tribe of Levi. This is where the Kohanim, the Kohens, the priests who worked in the temple, they're all from the tribe of Levi. That's significant in a second. Moses is actually from this tribe. Source 9, Moses wrote this Torah and gave it to the priests, the descendants of Levi, who carried the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and to all the elders of Israel. Rashi, I heard that on the very day that Moses gave the Torah scroll to the sons of Levi, as the verse says, and he gave it to the priests, the descendants of Levi, all of the people, the whole nation, came before Moses and said to him, Moses, our teacher, we also stood at Sinai and accepted the Torah, and it was also given to us. Why then are you giving it to them? Why are you giving the members of your tribe control over it, so that someday in the future they may claim it was not given to you, it was only given to us? Moses rejoiced over this, and it was on that account that he said to them, this day you have become a people. This meant it is today that I understand that you cleave to God and desire him. Before we explain, let's just finish off with the Midrash Rabbah, chapter 29. Rabbi Yanai said he wrote 13 Torah scrolls. 12 he gave to the 12 tribes, and 1 he placed in the ark as a control against forgeries. Moses writes 13 Torahs. 13. He gives 12 to 12 of the tribes, and to the 13th one he gives to the tribe of Levi. And it's a little different than the rest of them. This one is kept in the ark as a special Torah to protect against forgeries. If somebody comes with later on in some later generation and they have their Torah and they say, oh, this is what it's supposed to say. Another one says, no, this is what it's supposed to say. They can, fact check it with the Torah in the ark. This is the one. This is the one we're checking against. By the way, it's an interesting point. I didn't mention it. We have been a people for over 3,000 years. It's a very long time. Okay, our Torah is our guidebook. From the time of Moses in the desert till 2023, every generation has Torahs. And it's exactly the same text. Nothing changed. It's literally, not word for word, letter for letter, it's the same text. Since way back when. It's completely astonishing if you think about it. So, Moses gives this Torah to the tribe of Levi, and everybody complains, hey, why are you giving this special Torah to the tribe of Levi? Maybe they're going to say that Torah wasn't given to you guys, it was just given to us. We have this special Torah. And Moses got very happy about this because he sees that the Jews want a connection with God. They want to have the Torah. Question. 13 Torahs in one day, page 11. The question is asked, how could Moses have written 13 scrolls in one day? This event happened in the last day of his life. One answer given is that this was done by employing a Kabbalistic formula to make the quill write on its own. Fascinating answer, okay? There's an answer given. How did he write 13 scrolls in one day? The answer that is given is that if one understands and connects with very deeply, in a very real way, the secrets of the Torah, the Kabbalah, using certain formula and certain whatever, they can do certain things that might look very, very shocking. So there's an explanation given that Moses used a Kabbalistic thing of some sort to make 13 scrolls write themselves, that the quills just picked themselves up and wrote very quickly 13 Torahs. Although it's a very interesting answer, it's not the best answer, and we'll see why momentarily. Automated writing. We have discussed many times that mitzvot need to be observed in a natural manner, not through miracles, unless absolutely necessary. It is therefore difficult to say that the writing of the 13 scrolls was done through supernatural means. The Rebbe Rayatz, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, relates a famous story about the Alter Rebbe on this theme. While he was imprisoned by the Tsar's government, he was being transported by boat from the Peter Paul fortress to the secret police for an interrogation. The Alter Rebbe wanted to use the opportunity to recite the blessing on the new moon, so he asked the officer to stop the boat for him. When the officer refused, the boat came to a sudden stop on its own, but the Alter Rebbe didn't go ahead and say the blessing until the officer agreed to stop the boat himself. The reason was that the Alter Rebbe wanted the boat to stop for the blessing in a natural manner. With just those words, you might be very lost. Let me give some background explanation. The Alter Rebbe is the founder of the Chabad movement. When the Alter Rebbe introduced his innovation to the Hasidic philosophy, the Chabad philosophy, it was met with quite tremendous opposition. It was already opposition to the Hasidic philosophy, the Hasidic teachings, but the Alter Rebbe, with the Chabad branch of that, bore the burn, the brunt, whatever the words are, of major opposition from fellow Jews. They felt that some felt that the teachings weren't appropriate to be discussed publicly. They were secret. Some felt that they were that's what I'm looking for. They were philosophically incorrect. Jews don't look at things like this. It was a mistake. The opposition was unfounded. But they decided that they're going to put a libel against the Alter Rebbe, to have him arrested by the Tsar's government, and they were hoping for the worst. What did they do? They're very smart. They accused the Alter Rebbe of sending money to Turkey. Turkey at the time was at war with Russia. Now, was it true or was it not true? You can't really make something up like that. The answer was, technically it was true, but it wasn't true at all. Meaning, what did the Alter Rebbe do? He collected tons of money and shipped it off to the land of Israel, so the poor Jews there can have what to live on: food, clothing, basic necessities like that. The problem was, at the time, Israel was under Turkish rule. So you can twist it to make it look like that the Alter was sending money to Turkey. That's what they put forth. So obviously it was all made up. So at a certain point, when was this? This was in the late 1700s. If you want an exact year, I can get that for you later, God willing. So they wanted to interrogate a prisoner, they would take them out of the cell and bring them by boat to the interrogation offices, which was over a moat, I think it's called, a body of water surrounding a prison. And it was on that night that it was the ripe time to cite the blessing for the new moon. There's a special blessing we say for the new moon. The beginning of the Jewish month, you can't see the new moon. The 15th of the month, it's a full moon, and after the 15th, it starts getting smaller and smaller. So toward the beginning, in the middle of between the 7th or the 8th and the 14th of the month, There's a special blessing that we can say. In Erie, I will say it's a little hard to do this blessing because it's quite cloudy during the winter very often. And if you can't see the moon, you can't say the blessing. So the Alter wanted to say this blessing, and he wants to say it with proper concentration. Now, if you're on a moving boat and you have this guard is rowing the boat like this and it's moving, it's very hard to concentrate. So the story was that the Alter asked the guard to stop the boat. He wanted to say the blessing. Now, most prisoners don't talk to their guards and say, can make requests, but we're talking about the Alter Rebbe. He was a different kind of person. He asked him to stop the boat, and the guard, who asked you? And he didn't stop the boat. So he didn't stop the boat. So the Alter Rebbe stopped the boat miraculously. The boat just stopped. The guards couldn't figure out why the boat suddenly stopped. The Alter Rebbe said the little introductory paragraph that when we say before the blessing, and the boat continued. The Alter Rebbe again asked the guard, "Can you please stop the boat?" The guard realized that this person is not a regular person. It's a holy man we're talking about, and he can, do miracles. So he said, "I'll stop the boat, but I want you to give me a blessing in writing." So he agreed. He gave him a blessing in writing, and this person was tremendously blessed with us. He lived a very long life, and he was very wealthy, very healthy. He had a very good life after that. The guard stopped the boat. The Alter Rebbe said the blessing on the moon, and they continued on. The previous Rebbe, the reason we know this story is because the previous Rebbe actually told this story publicly, and we have it written down. It was written down in the previous Rebbe's talks. The previous Rebbe said he heard the story when he was a child, and he asked himself, he didn't understand, if the Alter Rebbe can stop the boat, why didn't he just stop the boat and say the blessing of the new moon? No? If he can stop the boat, say it. If you can't stop the boat, then wait for the guard to stop it, and don't stop it the first time because you can't do it. It's a very good question. And the previous Rebbe explained that when he got older, he realized he learned more Chassidus, he learned more of the Chassidic philosophy, and he understood that the way that things should be done is not in that way. We're supposed to do mitzvos in a natural manner, not through miracles. Not to change nature, because the idea of a mitzvah is to, within the framework of the physical universe, to bring godliness, which a mitzvah is an expression of godliness into the physical world, within the framework of the world, to permeate the world and to change it, and to affect it in that way. Not to shatter the rules of the world, so to say, I'm godliness, I'm here. That's not the point. Why was this relevant? Because we said the answer that was given was that the scrolls wrote on their own. But it's not a good answer. It's a good answer, but it's not the best answer. The best answer has to comply with this as well. Doing this mitzvah, writing these scrolls through self-automated writing quills doesn't really cut it. Page 12, writing in installments. Based on the above explanation regarding the Jewish people writing Torah scrolls in a short period of time, we can resolve this question as well. Moses didn't have to write 13 full Torah scrolls from the beginning to end on a single day. Most of the scrolls had been written already throughout the 40 years, and all that remained was to complete them from the verse, now write the song, until the end of the Torah. Source 10, a little fascinating tidbit here. While Moses was writing these Torah scrolls, he certainly wasn't able to do other things. Writing a Torah, and specifically the divine names it contains, demands full concentration. This is true about any scribe and any Torah, and is all the more true regarding Moses and the Torah scrolls designated to teach and guide the Jewish people for all future generations. Nevertheless, Moses put everything aside in order to write these Torahs himself, and didn't delegate the task to Joshua, Aaron, or Aaron's sons. He insisted on writing these scrolls himself because of his incredible love and care for the Jewish people. Okay. Section D is going to take a little bit while to read and explain. We're a little short on time. I want to keep you here all night. So what I'm going to do is we're going to skip the text. I'm going to explain to you what's going on. Throughout this discussion that we're having tonight about writing these scrolls, there is a question lurking in the depths, and we're just not noticing it. And it's a very big question. Okay? The major question is, the Jewish people are given a mitzvah that each person must write a Torah scroll. Darren, do you own a Torah scroll? You have one that's written on parchment, like a professionally made one? You have a Torah scroll? I don't have a Torah scroll. None of us have a Torah scroll. Sandy, you have a Torah scroll? I'll be surprised if you do. Most
Is that
Jews,
what's in the mezuzah?
the mezuzah is actually a small section of the Torah, it's the Shema,
Oh, okay.
right? But an entire Torah scroll, who has a Torah scroll? A synagogue has a Torah scroll. Maybe they have two, maybe three, usually one. What single individual owns a Torah scroll? I don't own one. He doesn't own. Nobody owns one. I would say, without exaggeration, and I'm pretty confident to say this, I would say 99% of Jews in the world today do not own a personal Torah scroll. I'm sure there are a few that do, but most don't. And this is quite shocking. We have a mitzvah. It's a mitzvah to own a Torah scroll. We have a mitzvah to keep Shabbat. We try our best to keep Shabbat. We have a mitzvah to put on tefillin. We try our best to put on tefillin every day. We have a mitzvah to light Shabbat candles. Light Shabbat candles. We have a mitzvah to write a Torah scroll. Nah. We pick and choose here. How does it work? In fact, the Rebbe even says at the end of this talk, he says that, you look at it yourself. This is the fourth paragraph down on page 13. I think it's the fourth paragraph in your book. I can speak from personal knowledge. My father and teacher was extremely meticulous in his observance of every detail of Jewish law, but he never instructed me, not when I became bar mitzvah and not years later, to make an effort to fulfill this positive mitzvah of writing a Torah. Why does nobody do this mitzvah? It's the strangest thing. It's as if we're so careful. Everything in Torah, writing Torah school, let's just forget about it. That's what it seems like, at least. The answer is like this, fascinating. Okay. Let's jump ahead a couple of holidays. We have Rosh Hashanah coming up, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. Sukkot, we have two major mitzvahs. Okay. There's a mitzvah sitting in a sukkah, that special hut, to eat in there and to spend time in it and to whatever you might do in your house, you do it in the sukkah instead. It's a big mitzvah. There's another mitzvah to shake the four species. It's called shaking the lulav. The lulav is a long palm branch with a myrtle branches and willow branches and the thing that looks like a lemon. It's not a lemon, but it looks like a lemon. You take these four species, you take them together and you give them a shake. You just did a biblical mitzvah, at least on the first day of Sukkot. Now, there's a very interesting requirement for this mitzvah of shaking the four species, shaking the lulav, which is it has to belong to you. Okay? It can't belong to somebody else. Meaning, if Darren owns a lulav set, and I say, hey, Darren, can I borrow your lulav and then I can do the mitzvah? And he'll say, oh, sure, because Darren's such a nice guy. I'll borrow it from him. I'll shake it, and I'll have all the right intentions. And I'm fulfilling a mitzvah of the creator of the universe. And I give it a shake. I did not do a mitzvah. Why? Because this is not mine. This is Darren's. Okay, so there's different options. Either you can just give it to me as a gift, say it's yours now, and then I could do it, and I'm doing it right. If somebody steals a lulav, God forbid, they also not fulfilling their mitzvah because it's not theirs. Actually, don't quote me on that. Whatever, it's a complicated discussion. Don't steal anything. There is a way to do it, and this is done, often. If you have such a set and you want to help somebody else do the mitzvah, there's a certain phrase you can say that actually circumvents this whole problem. I'm giving this to you as a gift on condition that you're going to give it back. It sounds very funny. What does that mean? This is a real thing in Jewish law. I'm giving this object to you as a gift. It's yours. It's 100% yours. With the stipulation, with the condition that you will return it. Okay? So when I say that and I give you the lulav and you shake it, you did the mitzvah. It's yours. But you have to give it back. If you don't give it back, it wasn't yours in the first place. If you gave it back, it was yours. It's very strange, but it works. There were communities back in the day, either they couldn't afford or they lived in a place where they didn't have access to these different species. They couldn't get a bunch of these, things that look like lemons, these etrogim they're called. They couldn't get a bunch of lulavs. What they would do is they would pitch in and they would buy a communal lulav set. One for the whole community. 1 second. How do you buy one thing and everybody uses it? I thought it has to belong to me personally. So this was bought and it was used in mind. It was with the stipulation that it's belonging to each and every single person. And when each person uses it, it belongs to them while they're using it. Similar idea. And a similar thing is with the Torah scroll. When there is a synagogue that has a Torah scroll, it belongs to the synagogue technically, but truly, to a very big degree, this Torah scroll belongs to the Jewish people as a whole. Not just as a whole, but to each individual Jew. Each individual Jew, in a very big way, owns the Torah scroll. It's theirs. So not only are we not performing this mitzvah, that's not the case. Every single Jew, if you're alive and you're a Jew today, you are fulfilling this mitzvah. Incredible. Because there's Torah scrolls that are owned by the masses. They're owned by the public. And you're part of the public. You own the Torah scroll. So you are fulfilling this mitzvah. That's why we don't go running after this mitzvah, because we're already doing it. And the Rebbe ends off. We'll read it inside, actually. It's important. It's at the bottom of page 15. Related to the above discussion, this is the time to make mention of the idea of uniting the Jewish people through writing of public Torah scrolls in which every Jew should purchase a letter. When a person purchases a single letter in the Torah, they have an association with the entire Torah scroll. This is similar to repairing a letter in a Torah scroll, which is considered akin. It's like writing the entire Torah. The Lubavitch Rebbe in the earlier 80s made an initiative that every Jew should own a letter in a Torah scroll. Should own a letter in a Torah scroll. The underlying theme, the underlying soul throughout tonight's lesson is that Jews are connected with Torah. The Zohar, the holy book of the Zohar, the original book of Kabbalah, says, fascinating statement, Yisrael araisa v'kucha bricho kulachad. I know, none of us speak Aramaic, right? Israel, the people of Israel, the Torah and God, the Holy One, blessed be He, are all one. Jews are connected to Torah, Jews are connected to God. This is the reality. This is not something we have to create. It's not something we have to do to make it happen. It already is. You ever heard somebody say that I'm a Jew at heart? Ever heard that phrase before? What does that mean? It means, somebody saying, usually it means, is I don't do any of the Jewish stuff. But I'm a Jew at heart. I'm a good person at heart, It's important to not only be a Jew at heart, it's important to express that. It's important to express our connection with the Torah. It's important to express our connection with God. How do we do that? Through learning Torah and doing mitzvahs. Very simple. And specifically also by purchasing a letter in a Torah scroll. That's very easy. I'll explain how in a second. And every time we add in doing a mitzvah and we learn more Torah, we're revealing this connection that we already have. There's a link. You can do it online. There's not a clear-cut link, but if you Google, okay, if you search the words, I did it earlier, actually. Let me just make sure that I don't get this wrong. If you go on Google and you search Unity Letter Torah, okay, Unity Letter Torah or Unity Torah Letter, okay, it should be the first result from Chabad.org. The subject line is "Get your letter in the Unity Torah." You can sign up right there. I think it's $1 for a letter. I think it's important. If you have $1 to spare, do it tonight. Purchase a letter in a Torah scroll. It'll bring blessing into your life. I'll end off with unfortunately, I don't know the details of the story. I'm sure the story is much more elaborate than I'm going to say, but it's an important story and it's related to what we're saying. When the Rebbe instituted this initiative of purchasing a letter in Torah scroll, there were certain, and the Rebbe put actually emphasis on kids purchasing letters as well, Jewish kids. Apparently this is toward the end of the Soviet Union, communist Russia. So there were still Jews in Russia. Things were lightening up, but it was still difficult to be a Jew there. So there were Jewish kids in America who decided that they're going to purchase letters in the Torah on behalf of kids in Russia because they couldn't do it themselves. So the way the story goes, the way I heard it at least, I didn't have time to look more into it before the class, was that there was a kid in Russia and somebody told him that some kid in America bought a letter for you in a Sefer Torah. Sefer Torah is the way you say Torah school, right? Some kid bought a letter for you in a Sefer Torah. Do you know what the kid answered? Speak Russian? He answered, Shto takoya Sefer Torah. What is a Sefer Torah? The message is that we as adults, even if our kids are older, we have grandkids, we have friends, we have family members that have kids, or we know people that are, Jewish kids at heart. They haven't matured in their Judaism very much. A Jewish child should never have to ask the question, Shto takoya Sefer Torah, what is a Sefer Torah? They should know what a Sefer Torah is. They should have a proper education. They should know about their Jewish identity. They should be involved. They should learn Torah. They should learn what it means to be a Jew. They should learn about the mitzvahs. You should never have a situation where there's a Jewish kid that asks the question, Shto takoya Sefer Torah. Shouldn't be on our agenda. We should go to a Jewish kid and they say, we got you a letter to Sefer Torah. He said, too late, I already did it myself. With that, we conclude tonight's class. Want to mention that the monthly minyan this month is actually going to be on Rosh Hashanah. We're making an effort to have a minyan on Rosh Hashanah, the second day of Rosh Hashanah, Sunday, September 17th, I believe 17th. And also we're having our exciting Rosh Hashanah class coming up next Thursday at 11 a.m. Any questions, comments?
So with regard to the discussion of the Torah being kosher, what if it's damaged through natural forces or through human forces? Is it?
Depends how it's damaged.
Let's just say it's.
If you can't hear on the mic, Darren asked, when we say a Torah is kosher or not, what if a scroll is damaged by natural forces, a hurricane, a flood, or a leaky faucet somewhere in the synagogue? Yeah, yeah.
Does it have to be repaired before it's deemed kosher and be,
Absolutely. Yeah. If it is such a damage that it had invalidated it, it has to be fixed. If it can be fixed. If it can be fixed, it has to be buried. Most mistakes can be fixed. There's different methods and ways to deal with that. Yeah. Any other questions? Oh.
So you had mentioned, I think you were talking, I can't remember which word it was, maybe ordinance, that the word was a little bit complex for you and maybe distant or different.
I know what ordinance means. Just
maybe it wasn't.
Yeah.
Is that because your first language is Yiddish?
No. I'm just me being my sense of humor. Okay. No, my first language is English. Okay. I'm a Brooklyn-born American. I'm not an American Jew. I'm a Jewish American.
All right. Just wondering.
No, it's the other way around. I'm an American Jew. Okay. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for coming. The class will be on YouTube, hopefully tomorrow morning. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
All right.